Hello, my name is Kyle Pugh with Webucator. During this video, I'll be introducing you to a C# library for creating semi-automatic window form dialog boxes. This C# library, called DynForm, is created by Dan Seaton. I'd like to thank Dan for allowing us to create this video based off of his blog post introducing us to DynForm, a C# library. For more information and to view the full blog post, feel free to visit Dan's blog post at the URL provided below. Alright, so here I am inside of Microsoft Visual Studio Express. This is the 2013 edition for Windows Desktop. In order to take advantage of this dynamic forms library that Dan has created for us, really doesn't matter what version of Visual Studio you use, or really just getting into a C# development tool. That'll work for you. So big picture here before we jump into utilizing the setup that Dan has given us, let's understand what this is all about, why this is going to benefit you. So Windows Forms, they come in many different flavors. Many different types of controls can be built on forms. Text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, standard clickable buttons, text areas. You got all sorts of controls that you can add to forms. And typically, if I open up Visual Studio and I start building a form, I'd normally build a Windows form application. I would then grab the toolbox and I would start grabbing controls from that toolbox. And then I would have to go and add the code to those controls to start controlling them. Well, what Dan has created here using this DynForm C# library is an interface that we can add to our project, to one of our classes, and inherit all functionality that he's built into this library to help streamline our efforts in building and validating our data that comes through our forms, creating a more robust and streamlined interface for us to work with as we build our Windows forms. So let's take a look at how you do this. My first step, I'm going to go up to my File menu, and I'm going to create a new project. I need a new C# Windows Forms application project, and I'm going to give it a name. This will be called DynForm, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So this gives me the nice Windows Form application template that I can now start to build my application within. Now my next step is I now need to grab the files that are available on Dan's blog, download them to my computer, and then add them to my project. Now I've already done those steps. I've downloaded the zip file found on his blog post, and now I'm going to add them to my new Windows Form application here. So I'm going to go into my Solution Explorer. I'll right click my project. I'm going to go into Add, and I'll add existing items. So like I said, mine's sitting on my desktop. I'm going to go into the source folder, and I'll grab all of these CS files and add them to my project. So now I can fully take advantage of this library to be able to create these dynamic automatic forms. So now my next step is I'm going to build a class that I'm then going to tie to this dynamic form that we're about to create. And I'm going to use the same example that Dan uses on his blog. I'm going to create a class about a dog. So I'll right click my project once again. I'm going to go back to Add, and I'm going to add a class. So I'm going to call this dog, and I'll hit OK. So now it gives me a little bit of foundation here to start building my class about a dog. And I'm going to give the dog some functionality here, nothing big. But I'm going to create a few little properties here. The first one will be the name of the dog, and I'll bring in the get and set, although I'm really not going to do a whole lot with it. I'm just going to add those there as placeholders for now, or perhaps not. Maybe we won't do any further validation on them. I'll bring in another one, another string that will be the owner property. And once again, same thing. I'll bring in the get and set. And let's do one more here. We're going to do another public, but this one will be a bool, and this is going to be the barks. property. And I don't know about you, but my dog, there's not an off switch for it. It just barks. I can't tell it to be false unless it's sleeping, I guess, or eating. Not even when it's eating, though, it's barking. All right, so I've got the beginnings of my dog here. Now to add further functionality here, this is where we're going to implement the interface that I've added to this project. So I'll go back up to my class dog, and I'm going to grab the interface called DynForm entity. Now I'm now going to implement that interface. This gives me a few bits of functionality that is now added to my dog. Now I'm not going to take advantage of the save data method here, so I'm going to just wipe out the exceptions that can be thrown. Let's just get the get and set inside of there. And I'm also going to remove the exceptions for the validation method as well as the setup fields method. But we are going to do something here now. So for the setup form fields, again, normally if I'm building a form, I would go to the form interface, go to the toolbox, and I start dragging controls out. Well, now I'm going to do this programmatically using all of the functionality within this library. So now I'm going to create a few controls, nothing big, but I'm going to take advantage of the add layout text box control or method that comes with this library. And it wants two parameters from us. The first one is the label or the name of the control. I'm going to call it name. This will be like the pet name or dog name. And it's going to be tied to the prop name that we created earlier. So there's one. Now to be a little more efficient here, I'm going to copy and paste this. And I'm just going to make a couple of small tweaks just to set up two more controls. We'll get one for the owner. We'll get one for the barks. And let's change these to be tied to the properties that were created earlier. Owner, prop, and barks prop. All right, so now I'm starting to build my form using the setup form fields method that was built into the interface that I've implemented into my class. That comes with the DynForm library. So now I can add in some validation for my controls. And I'm going to do just some quick little validation here. We'll use a quick little switch, a quick switch statement here. And the switch is going to look at the property name. Great. That's what's going to get passed into our validate method here, property name. And what do I want to do inside there? I'm going to create just a quick little validation. I'm going to do a case statement here to check the property that's getting passed in and see if it's equal to nothing. And if it is, then we'll return an error back to the user. So we'll say case name, take in the name prop, which is the property that we created earlier. And if, let's just finish this out. This dot name prop is equal to nothing, right? The user didn't put a name inside of the dog's name text box that we've created. Then we're just going to return simply you must enter a name. All right. And with my switch statement here, I'll bring in my break. And because the validate method is expecting a returning value, I will return nothing. There we go. No errors within there if the name prop contains a value. So by implementing this interface, we've got three pieces of functionality. We got some information about saving the data, about validating the controls or the properties, and getting in and setting up the form itself. Now, one last thing here. I need a way to be able to trigger this form to actually show it to the users. So I'm going to go back to my initial form that was generated for me when I first created this Windows form application. And I'm going to make this really simple. I'm going to open up my toolbox, and I'm just going to add a button control. Now when somebody clicks on this button, it'll then launch my dog form. So I'll double click that button, bring me into the code behind, and I'm going to add just a couple little lines here to first create a new dog based on that class that we just created. Remember, that's where we got all the properties and all the further functionality out of this. I'm now going to create a new form. We'll just call it F for short. And this is going to take advantage of this form library that we're consuming here, DynForm. Now, when I create a new dynamic form, it wants two things from me. It wants to know the title of the form, and it wants to know, well, what type of object entity is it creating here. So I'm just going to title this as add dog, and it's going to build a new dog. All right, and one last thing, I'm now going to show that dialog box. And that's really it. Utilizing and consuming this library, this interface to implement functionality and to take advantage of the rest of the code within this library. Streamlining our interface, streamlining our efforts in building the forms. So take a look. I'll go back to my form. I'm going to go ahead and start running my application here. This brings up my generic form with my little button in there, but when I give it a click, I've now got this nice add dog form. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit the run button to be able to run my application. Just start at the top. This gives me my initial form with my button on it. I'll give that a click. And now I've got this nice add dog form with those three controls found on my form. My text box control for the name, the text box control for the owner, and the check mark for whether or not the dog barks, that Boolean operator. And you can see that my validation is already kicking in. I can see that with my name, because it's empty, that I am getting my message back that's being returned from the validation method. You must enter a name. Now if I put something in there, let's say I got Sparky, that validation is no longer being validated or running through that conditional statement. It's now a valid value. And that's it. Simple creation and validation of Windows forms. So there you have it. DynForm, a C# library to assist you as you develop your automatic window form dialog boxes. How much easier can it be than that? Using this interface, building in some custom functionality to design your form programmatically and to validate those form controls. For more C# tips and tricks and information, feel free to visit Dan's blog posts and full blog at the URL provided below.